Hey, beer nerds, how's it going tonight? It's Ryan with Beer by the Numbers, and I am super excited to get into a beer tonight and talk some beer news. Without any further ado, I guess let's crack a beer because it's a long Monday. We got a long week to go here, so we might as well have a beer and enjoy a good Monday night. So tonight, in honor of the cool homebrew stream that I did on Saturday night with Brenda, I'm gonna be rocking and rolling with one of my classic Heffa beers. And these are really, really tasty. So I'm excited to get into it. But they did get a little aggressive with the fermentation. So hopefully this one doesn't quite blow up on me. But I'm excited to get into it. Oh yeah, so very smoky. Wow, that's so much smoke. And the head is already slowly trying to climb out of the bottle. But wow, did the yeast ever get excited for this one? And I mean, I can't really blame them because this is the aside from this one little issue, this is the best batch of homebrew I have ever done. Yeah, so it's just gonna go ahead and I guess slowly make its way into the glass, all via foam. See, this is the fun part about the adventure of homebrewing is just sometimes you get something crazy like this going on, and you're not really sure what to do about it. But I guess next time I'll have to make sure the yeast stay under control a little bit, because man, did they get excited! Look at how much head just bursts out of this thing, and it's still trying to climb out of the bottle. Jeez. All right, well, I guess I'll have to wait for that to calm down before I can get into it. But I can already tell you it smells great. So yeah, if you missed that stream on Saturday, I did started brewing a California Common, which should be a really, really good beer once it comes out. I'm really excited to try that and see how it goes. I just checked on my fermenting beer a little bit ago, and the yeast seem very happy. They're bubbling away, so that's always a good sign. So very excited for that. Oh boy, look at that, just climbing right out. See, there's not much I can do to stop it. It wants to leave the bottle and get into my glass. So yeah, this was the Heffa and like I said, the yeast very much enjoyed themselves making this one. So um, yeah, I guess I'm not sure how it gets that carved up. I don't know. Thankfully, none of them have burst out of the bottle. The worst I get is a long settling time while these things calm themselves down. But yeah, it's been a really, really good beer to have on hand, this Heffa as much as it is over carved in the bottle, and I don't really know how you get it that carved in the bottle. I use the same amount of yeast and priming sugars I did every other beer I made, so it's kind of weird to me that it just burst out of the bottle like this. But it does smell nice and is definitely really good. So I do have a question of the night I want to ask all the folks in the chat. I'll ask it throughout the evening here. It's down in the description below too, but I want to know, if you could only drink beer from one brewery for the rest of your life, which brewery would that be? Which brewery would you say is solid enough that that would be the one you would choose to drink forever? If I were to answer that question, I'll go ahead and answer that now. I think my answer would be probably one of the great breweries here in Minnesota, and that's of course Surly Brewing Company. Man, do they make a lot of great West Coast beers, but they also kind of push the envelope in terms of some experimentation and things like that. So, they definitely have some unique brews. They have all sorts of different things to offer, whether it's a great imperial stout in their Surly Darkness, or it's several different solid IPAs and really good hoppy beers. And of course, since it's that time of year, they of course have a great Oktoberfest brew too. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Craft beer pours. You're right. It is a tough question. I really had to think that through today as I was trying to figure out what my answer would be to the one brewery that I would drink for the rest of my life. So, yeah, for me, it's Surly Brewing out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. They make a lot of great beers, and they do a lot of experimentation too, which I think would keep me going for a little while longer than a brewery that brews a little bit more consistent batch of things. Mm. Brenda says 12 Eyes, which is a local brewery out of St. Paul here, and they always have 12 beers on tap, which is pretty good because opened a couple years ago and they started with 12 beers on tap all the time, which is really cool in my opinion. Yes, and they rotate beer recipes through constantly. So yeah, she's exactly right. A different beer every 4 days. Yeah, they really crank through all their different homebrew recipes. They've turned into commercial versions and do that all the time. So yeah, yeah, that's a great pick for a brewery you drink for the rest of your life. You definitely would not run out of variety, Brenda. That's for sure. Mm. But me though, I'm sticking with Surly. I'm sticking with my West Coast IPAs, big stouts, and great fest beers. And then they do some sours too. So they do a little bit of everything because they're huge and they can. And why not? If you were a brewer with that many toys, I wouldn't blame you for doing that either. So let's dive into some beer news for the week because, as you know, I love following around beer news all the time. This is an update on a story I've been covering for a few weeks now about Bud Light's promotion with the Cleveland Browns, and they had all these beer fridges stocked full of Bud Light around the city of Cleveland that said, "When the Browns win, Cleveland wins." And then they would open up the beer fridges. And last Thursday night, they won their Thursday night football game against the New York Jets, and they all got to open the fridges. And actually, they sent the Bud Light Night from the Dilly Dilly commercials out to help everyone open up the fridge and pass out some beers out of the fridge. So, yeah, it was a really cool celebration. And like I said, I don't really drink Bud Light. I don't remember the last time I have had a Bud Light, but I gotta say those guys kill it with the marketing. You know, every 3 to 4 years they seem to come out with another really genius marketing campaign. Whether it's Suds McKenzie or the Real Men of Genius or now the Dilly Dilly stuff. It just always seems like their marketing people are super on point. And I thought this partnership with the Browns also kind of gave everybody some hope. So that was kind of cool to see, actually. Yeah. So craft beer pours answering my question of the night: if you had to drink beer from just one brewery for the rest of your life, which one would you choose? Going with Trillium out of Boston, obviously a really solid choice. Great New England IPAs out of there. I can honestly say, and this is, I'm not a beer hunter. I'm not a guy who goes and chases around all sorts of beers from around the country. So I've actually never had a Trillium IPA, which I think is really sad for me, because that makes me a very very sad camper that I've never had a Trillium beer. But to be honest, after hearing what people go through to get one of those, I don't know if I want to go through all the hassle because it's Monday, start of a work week. Beer is kind of a relaxing thing for me, and I hear Trillium beers can be hard to get. So yeah, I'm not sure, but I've never heard anyone speak badly of them, other than that their beer is kind of pricey because it's in such demand. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a really good thing. Hmm. Brenda also chiming back in on the question of the day for those of you who just joined. If you only could drink beer from one brewery for the rest of your life, which brewery would that be and why? She'd probably have to go with Great Divide as a real choice, or maybe some Brewdog, which is a good one too. Yeah, Great Divide definitely has a super solid offering for sure. They have a lot of variety too, and yeah, I was definitely impressed with that. And then yeah, Brewdog's always fun too. That Punk IPA, ooh, I could drink a bunch of those for sure. William Fletcher's answer is his home brewery. Boom, easy peasy, man. That's a great way to go because then you make whatever you want. You can drink whatever you want. That's perfect. I would not choose my home brewery because I made an absolutely overcarbed Hefeweizen here. But yeah, you go back to the beginning of the stream later on and watch me pour out this Hefeweizen that tried to climb its way out the glass because the yeast got too excited. It's absolutely nuts. Hopefully, the California Common I got in the fermenter on Saturday turns out a lot better than that. And that was a really fun stream too, going through that as well. Mm. Craft Beer Pour says it's probably easier than I think to get Trillium beers, which is probably true. I just, I like I said, beer's supposed to be relaxing for me. I gotta be able to get it and get it cold. Let's see what else is going on in the world of beer. So, Baltimore's first farm brewery is set to open up. Now, this is a concept I haven't heard a lot about. A farm brewery is a brewery where at least one of ingredient in every beer is grown on site at the brewery location. Now, most breweries they will grow some hops. I see hop vines around at all sorts of breweries, things like that. I don't think they grow a lot of barley or culture their own yeast a lot of the time. That's really hard to do. Um, so yeah, Farm Brewery is really cool. So this one's opening outside of Baltimore in Maryland, where they have a big hop yard there, and they're opening a brewery right on site too. And this farmer is he's started doing hops because they went in such demand, and then he started. Of course, once you start growing hops, you got to try your hand at home brewing, and then people really thought it was good. So then he's like, you know what? I'll open up this brewery. He's a beef farmer, so raises beef cows, but after getting into hops and homebrewing, he decided, yeah, let's go. Let's get started on the craft beer thing. So it's this new concept called farm brewing. And as, craft breweries continue to kind of work their way into smaller and smaller communities as the demand gets more and more viable for them to move out there, I think we're going to start seeing more of these farm breweries, especially if there can become a little bit of a destination type brewery. I think that'd be really popular. And then, not only can you really see the craft behind making of the beer and talk to the brewer and things like that. But now that same guy is the dude who grew the hops. So he can answer any of your questions all the way down to, the type of nutrients he used in the soil, what kind of trellises he has. Like you can go way in depth of your conversation in beer. And, that's one of the things I love about craft beer and tap rooms is that I can really get in some good conversations with the people who brewed and made the product. So, yeah, I think this is a really cool idea. William Fletcher says beef beer. I don't know. That is one boundary I don't think a lot of brewers have pushed yet. So maybe one of these days after we get fed up with New England IPAs and delicious fruity sours, people will start going the savory direction. We'll get some beef ramen stouts going on, stuff like that. Yes, Brenda, I do know a farmer, but I don't think he's going to brew any beer. We'll have to see about that. So, Oklahoma is running out of beer. And this is kind of a weird situation because Oklahoma just recently kind of changed some of their beer laws to kind of get past some of the prohibition era laws that were still in place there. So for a while, it was illegal to go above 3.2% ABV for a lot of the beer that was on the shelves and grocery stores and liquor stores. And they finally took that law off the books, meaning that, all the beer is going to start flowing in Oklahoma, all the different kinds. And that's really cool to see. But that new law doesn't go into effect until October 1st, which happens to be the government's start of a new fiscal year, which makes sense. But in the meantime, it's been a warm summer. People want a lot of beer, and there's only so much of that 3.2% beer left. And nobody's brewing a lot more because nobody really makes 3.2% beer anymore because nobody has these stupid 3.2% laws anymore. So it's weird because they're running out of these last batches of 3.2% beer, and the entire state is feeling a major beer crunch right now because they can't start selling the new beer above 3.2% until next week. So they're totally running out of beer right now, and it's kind of like a weird, crazy, almost desperate situation. So yeah, it's kind of weird the lengths that people are going to. Some people are driving 50 plus miles, get across the border to another state to grab a 6-pack, or well, you probably wouldn't go for just a 6-pack, maybe a nice slab 24 or 30, something like that. But yeah, it's kind of a weird situation these laws create, and then as soon as you take them away, you kind of make these series of other problems too. So yeah, it's kind of funny. Brenda says almost like a Lichtenhainer. Yeah. Let's see. A Lichtenhainer is, well, I've only really had one, and the beer was kind of smoky and kind of sour and tasted kind of a lot like cured salty ham bacon in a way. It was a really interesting brew for sure. Um, yeah, it's a really tasty and kind of obscure German style. But yeah, Lichtenhainers are they're definitely one I would try. I'm not sure I'd drink them all the time, but they're definitely worth a shot. That's for sure. Mm. So are Hefeweizens. That's right. I hope my next beer comes out good from that Saturday stream. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that. Let's see what's going on. The Budweiser family heir Adolphus Busch the Fifth um, is not really getting into the beer business like the rest of his family has for so many years. Instead, he's using his great connections to one of the biggest American business empires ever to start a cannabis based startup using some seed money provided by AB InBev. And this is just another step in the direction of beer manufacturers taking the cousin of hops, cannabis, and using it to kind of expand their business and product offerings. Both hops and cannabis are in the Cannabaceae family of plants. So they're actually pretty closely related, and that's why you have a lot of IPAs that are described as dank, which is a common phrase used to describe a lot of other green plants out there too. Mm. So yeah, it's interesting that all these beer companies are getting into weed production, but yeah, this guy is really working on you know getting startup off the ground kind of underneath that Anheuser-Busch umbrella. So, and I know that earlier this year, Constellation Brands was making headway into the space. And then I think Diego Giaggio, however you pronounce the company that owns Guinness too, is also looking to enter that space. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting as laws and attitudes continue to change around weed and cannabis, how these big beer companies are already positioning themselves to be one of the primary players in the market. And, earlier this year, we saw Canada, totally legalize weed. And then immediately you get cannabis beers start pouring into the market already. So, yeah, it's an interesting concept. William Fletcher, they have to change the name to Burning Bush. That is a good one. That is a good one. I like that. Mm. Yeah, sounds good. So, if you're just joining us, the question of the night is um, if you could only drink beer from one brewery for the rest of your life, which brewery would that be and why? So, for me, I would do Surly Brewing Company out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Not only are they kind of local to me, but they also make a lot of really great beers for every season. They've got some lighter ones, some darker ones, a great Oktoberfest. Their Darkness Russian Imperial Stout is all the rage. In come a little later this year. Yeah, it's just a really really solid bunch of beers, and they're all kind of West Coast and hop forward. So I really really enjoy what they crank out over there. So yeah, that would be totally where I would drink from the rest of my life. And I think part of it is definitely gotta get somewhere that does a fair bit of experimentation. Gotta get a little bit of variety in there too. You can't just drink the same four beers. Well, actually, some people can, but I definitely need a little bit more variety and experimentation going on. So let's see. All right. So this great historical debate about beer continues. Did humans start raising cereal crops like barley to bake bread and have food, or did they use it to brew beer first? So, which one of these did they do first? Did they grow it for food or did they grow it for beer first? And basically, it's gone back and forth for many different years because some people they continue to find older and older evidence of each one. So for a while, it was thought beer was pretty old because they found something from like 6,000 BC that showed some grain in a pot. and then they moved on and they found, a little bit earlier signs of agriculture around 8000 BC. Well, now the bar has been set once again. We're looking at like 11,000 BC because Stanford University found some residue on some stone mortars in Israel. And these residues were byproducts of basic brewing operations. So now the oldest record of cereal crops being used in the Middle East is back in beer's court. So beer is officially the reason we started farming. End of story. We had enough. We had plenty of food. We could figure it out. We were just trying to grow barley so we could make beer. And honestly, I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of that, unfortunately. But I do really like, as a beer nerd, I gotta love thinking that humans were originally sitting around trying to grow grains for beer. I love that idea. So, cheers, William. Have a good night. Yeah. So we'll probably end up finding something 25,000 years old that just said agriculture. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, but we'll see how that goes. Another another great story I saw this week was kind of related to a local brewery here in Minnesota called Boom Island Brewing Company. And they had originally opened up in an old warehouse in, what was a former industrial part of town, but now is kind of a part of town that's a little rougher, a little down on their luck. And the owner always took pride that bringing a brewery to that space was going to help to revitalize the community a bit, and it certainly did because they brew a bunch of great Belgian beers. This guy has done all sorts of training in Belgium, does collaborations with breweries in Belgium, and makes just really, really great Belgian style brews, which is one of my favorite kind of brewing sets of styles, are all the great Belgian ones. Unfortunately, though, as things have progressed, the problems that originally kept a lot of people away, they didn't really get better with the brewery in the neighborhood, and they actually continued to get worse. The article from the local paper kind of quotes some various crime problems in the area, whether it be a couple of violent shootings or just they had a regular who comes in every weekend whose car got broken into 2 weekends in a row, not just once but twice, which is kind of crazy to me. And the whole reason I bring this up is not I don't like doing these local stories like this, but the whole reason I bring this up is I wonder how many breweries this has happened to. A lot of craft brewers are definitely those community oriented and focused people, much like Kevin at Boom Island is. And he's a really great guy, and I love every chance I get to talk with him. But yeah, he wanted to do something nice. He wanted to bring a new business and something to draw people into this rougher neighborhood. But I wonder how many times that doesn't work out, because we see so many breweries open up in different old industrial zones around cities and in different towns, where they seem to actually kind of succeed in bringing other new businesses, and then just a lot of foot traffic to that area, because a brewery is a lot of times a destination, especially in the modern golden age of beer tourism. Breweries are a great destination. So, but on the flip side, there are stories like Boom Island in Minneapolis where, I'd be interested to hear if this happens across the industry more. I'm wondering if this is a common occurrence where maybe sometimes this doesn't work out, and do they end up shutting down, or are they going to do what Kevin at Boom Island is going to do and move his location? So, I wish them all the best because I love the beer. I'm probably going to go over there and make sure I get my support in during this transition process too, because I want to make sure he keeps brewing great beer, because I love the stuff. So, but yeah, I wonder how many times this kind of will build a brewery and people will come and it's going to really revitalize the space. I wonder how many times that doesn't work out. So yeah, that's just an interesting local story that I think has kind of bigger implications, because so many breweries open up in these kind of um, older industrial spaces that might not be quite as touristy or foot trafficy as some other spots throughout cities. So just one of those beer stories that got my mind turning. So if you're just joining us, tonight's question of the night that people have been sharing in the chat is, if you could only drink beer from one brewery for the rest of your life, which brewery would that be? And for me, definitely Surly Brewing Company out of Minneapolis. Great West Coast inspired beers, very hop forward, and they do a lot of experimentation. I love this stuff. We've heard things like Great Divide, heard things like Trillium. William Fletcher was adamant he would only drink his own beer at home too. So I think that is a great thing as well. Let's see more great beer stories. So craft beer is a really trendy and on point thing right now, but I think for certain folks, they're missing their cocktails. And one of the things that's really becoming more and more popular right now in the industry are cocktail inspired craft beers. So there's actually one brewery here locally that does two of them and they kind of rotate them through, especially during the summer. They do a gin and tonic style ale, which actually was very good. And a lot of people really seem to like that one. So that was the first cocktail inspired craft beer that they did that really took off. And then they immediately followed that up, I think, a year or two later with a Moscow Mule inspired version. So they're using these kind of stronger herbal flavors that are present in certain cocktails or liquors. Things like, juniper in a gin and tonic beer, um, or the classic vodka and lime combination, and the ginger especially that goes into a Moscow Mule. So I think these local breweries that are trying to come up with something new, push the envelope a little bit, are kind of creating these new cocktail inspired ales to really kind of capitalize on people's revitalizing interest in cocktails. So I think it's really cool, and it's a nice hybrid because as a beer lover, I do primarily drink beer, but every once in a while I want a nice cocktail. But those cocktail style beers are a great hybrid in my opinion, for sure. I can't remember if I've seen an old fashioned ale or not, but I would definitely drink that for sure. So let me see. This article listed a few from around the country. Yeah, so Ballast Point has a Moscow Mule Ale. Let's see. There's a Sazerac, which is from Kansas City Boulevard Brewing. Flying Dog has a mimosa beer. I guess I never really thought, but mimosa would be a really easy one to do. And then Anderson Valley has a gin and tonic goza too. And then Shorts Brewing, where are they out of? It doesn't say, but they do a Bloody Mary beer. So yeah, all sorts of cool cocktail inspired beers to try out there. Brenda says a caipirinha beer next, which I think is a little bit too specialty there. Maybe you could launch that in the Brazil market though. The caipirinha is kind of the national drink of Brazil and uses a local liquor called cachaça, which is strong, very strong. I think it's fermented sugar cane, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it's very, very strong, probably because they get a lot of sugar in that mash going. John Martinez answering our question of the night with Brewery Ommegang, which really solid choice there. I've only had a few of their beers over here in the middle part of the country, but yeah, they definitely churn out some solid offerings, that's for sure. So yeah, I'd say Brewery Ommegang is a really good choice for one brewery you have to drink for the rest of your life. All right, so if you've watched these beer news streams before, you know that I have an obsession with finding and rooting out bad beer news articles. And this one, I don't even need to read much of the article to you. I can just literally say the title of the article and you'll know why it's bad, because the premise is just terrible. Craft beer culture lags in Europe. And I just find this whole concept ridiculous, that craft beer culture would be lagging behind in Europe, because the US, really had absolutely no beer culture. It was basically dead until the craft beer revolution happened here. And then you're like, oh, this culture is the model for every other beer culture that should exist out there. It's like, this is somebody who's never been to Europe, never seen that every beer in Germany pretty much has its own brewery specified custom serving glass that it needs to come in, because that glass has been, over the years they found that it tastes really good and really brings out the aroma. And like, this is something they have been doing for much, much longer than the craft beer revolution here in the US. Do they do as much experimentation, and is there as much appetite for crazy out there beers in Europe? No. Does that mean they don't have a beer culture or a fine craftsmanship culture when it comes to beer? Absolutely not. Just the whole idea that Europe is somehow lagging behind the US in beer culture, I think it's ridiculous. That's like saying China is lagging behind the US in culture. Like, what does that even mean? They're two different things. Like, Chinese culture and American culture are very different. Like, you can't just say that one is the standard that everyone should go to and that the others are lagging behind. That's just it makes no sense. Like, I don't understand why that premise would even be there. Like, Europe has had all these great local styles. You go to an individual town, and basically all the breweries there make one style of beer. And you might be like, oh, that sounds kind of lame, until you realize there are like 100 different towns you can go to each try a classic and well designed style of beer that has stood the test of time. Like, it drives me nuts that, like, a lot of times American drinkers think it's really awesome, and I get it. I'm young. I like the variety. Variety is the spice of life, and I love to try all sorts of different beers. But at the same time, like, to say that Europe is somehow lagging in beer culture just feels like a ridiculous and out there statement to me. I get it. You might really like the craft beer culture here in the United States, but that doesn't mean the other beer cultures are bad. It's not. That's not how beer culture works at all. Um, mm. Speaking of German beer culture, I'll just go ahead and prove that last story wrong by this story. In order to celebrate Oktoberfest, Lufthansa will be serving kegged Oktoberfest beers on their planes. That's right. You can get a fresh draft beer on a Lufthansa aircraft during Oktoberfest. How is that not great beer culture? It's integrated into their travel. That's amazing. I think one of the weird things, though, is that I'm not sure, and they probably have done this before, but I think one of the kind of weird things about serving beer at altitude is that everything gets a lot foamier. So I know that one of the strongest carbonated sodas is Diet Coke. And actually, a lot of stewardesses don't really like it. They'll never say this to you, but some of them get annoyed when people order Diet Coke because it takes so much longer to settle down when they're trying to crank out 300 passengers drink orders. Because when you're at altitude and the pressure's a little bit less because they can't keep the plane exactly like sea level, they struggle a little bit with some of these foamier drinks. So, although Lufthansa is bringing kegs on the plane, which I absolutely would order like 7 beers on my flight, wherever I was flying to in Germany. But yeah, I wonder if they're going to have any issues with things like carbonation and serving. But I guess they worked out a process to do it because there's going to be beer on Lufthansa flights for Oktoberfest. So I think that's really exciting. So does Europe have a lack of beer culture? Absolutely not. You don't see keg beers on planes here in the U.S. Or if you do, let me know, because I need to take that airline for everything. Um, anyway, for those of you who just joined us, question of the night: if you could only drink from one brewery for the rest of your life, which brewery would that be and why? I have a couple more beer stories, and then I think I'm going to wrap up for the night. Maybe go get another beer because it's going to be a crazy week at work, so we'll see. So this last story I have is Jim Gaffigan now makes regular appearances on CBS's Sunday Morning. He's a comedian, so he does some comedy, and obviously it's on network TV, so it's pretty PG comedy. So it wasn't this past Sunday, but the Sunday before that, He was talking about beer, and what he said really upset a lot of people in the craft beer community. Um, I can't really play for you the video here. I think CBS is kind of a bear when it comes to copyright claims, anyway. But what I will say is that basically he was just kind of ranting on why can't we have beer that tastes like beer anymore? I mean, I get it, everybody's got these personal preferences, but for me, a guy who's kind of older and just likes, my beer to taste like beer, why is it so hard for me to order now? There's like a bunch of different choices, and I got these bartenders trying to get me to try three different things when all I really want is something that kind of tastes like a pilsner or maybe a Guinness, something like that. So yeah, he was making a couple jokes. Honestly, I didn't really find him that funny. You need to get a little further out there than network TV lets you to really get me laughing. But he was just making kind of a simple point, and he's like, and honestly, there's a lot of bad craft beers out there today. And so obviously, the craft beer community really didn't like this. It immediately set off a Twitter firestorm, went a little bit viral. But, sometimes I feel like the craft beer community and probably just the online warriors, but I feel like they're a little bit too sensitive because like immediately he just lands in some hot water. People are tweeting him, trash talking him. And then not only that, but the Brewers Association marketing director actually takes the time to write an open letter to Jim Gaffigan, who did a 2-minute spot on CBS this morning, trashing that he doesn't really like the way the craft beer scene is going. And I get it. Craft brewers have really had to fight in this country to get laws changed, to fight against kind of a system that had been rigged against them for a while, to really get people excited about investing in craft beer. Like, there are so many hurdles that these men and women in the industry have had to jump through to get craft beer to the point where it is today. At the same time, though, like, craft beer is 25% of the American beer industry now. And it still feels like everybody is being really defensive. You can't have one comedian going off on a tangent about how he doesn't really like the direction of the beer scene without having to do a whole press release on it from the Brewers Association. Like, it kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth that like nobody can take some criticism. Like, I'm a YouTuber. I come on here all the time. People say nasty stuff about me. I don't really care. Like, I enjoy my beer. I enjoy beer the way I want it. Like, if you want to talk shit about the beer I like, you know what? Go ahead. More power to you. You don't like it. That's cool. Make a couple jokes about it. You didn't even say anything that bad. Yeah, he said some of the craft beer options out there were bad. I think that's true. I think he was probably generalizing a bit too much, but I think he was making a good point. And it's so ridiculous that immediately on this like soft comedy, this network television comedy, that the Brewers Association marketing director just, I need to pen this open letter. I got to defend craft beer from this one comedian making one joke about it because it doesn't fit our craft beer cultural zeitgeist. Like, I just, I don't, I don't get it. I don't get why craft beer needs to be so defensive. Like, celebrate the work that's been done, celebrate the people who make the industry great. But yeah, some people are going to bash and hate on craft beer. That's what happens when you get successful. That's how it goes. So, like, embrace that. Love the haters. I can't. It was just so ridiculous to me that this 2-minute, not funny comedy rant just elicited this ridiculous overreaction from the beer community. And the fact that, and I still just can't get over that the industry trade group had to come out with a press release bashing Jim Gaffigan. Well, she didn't really bash Jim Gaffigan, but just you know countering Jim Gaffigan's argument. It's like, it's one comedian. It's like we got to be able to take some punches here. Like, craft brewers have taken a lot of punches and worked really hard. They don't care that one you know comedian said something bad. It just feels like a total and complete overreaction to me at this Jim Gaffigan stuff. So if you want to go watch the original video, I'm sure it's out there. It's all over the place. You can just search Jim Gaffigan beer. You're going to find it. Really, I didn't think it was that funny. he had, maybe some of the people had a point that he was generalizing a bit too much, but that's what comedians do. They take a specific situation and generalize it to make a joke. That's what comedians do. So like, I don't know. It just feels like the beer industry as a whole is just very, very sensitive all the time. And sometimes it just grinds my gears a little bit. Because like, let's just celebrate what's there. Let's live life in the moment. We don't have to play defense all day, every day. Like let's go. So anyway, that's all the beer stories I have for this week. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Coming up this week, I have a great hazy IPA video coming out tomorrow. Yeah, I went a little crazy making this one, so you'll definitely want to stick around the channel and check that out tomorrow. And who knows, maybe I'll do a stream later this week. I don't know. We'll see how things go. But I will definitely be back next Monday for another Beer by the Numbers live stream to cover the beer news of the week. So I'm gonna finish this Hefeweizen. And I'll see you next week for another Monday beer news stream.